Want to say welcome to the Commissioners meeting, May the 21st. Media, we appreciate you being here. And this will be we'll just reconvene from our May the 14th meeting. We'll call that back to order. And so at this time, Mr. Rowland, it's your party. We're just hanging out with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Board. Appreciate you all. Thank you. Brought another budget with me tonight. I brought one more budget. This is the fiscal year 25 budget, and you reflect back on other budgets each year as you go through the budget process, and when you look back on 11 of them that we've done together and that I've had the privilege of presenting, I believe this one means more to me than any of them, the one that I'm presenting here tonight. And it all started with the one in 14-15. But the one that I'm presenting here tonight is the one that I'm most proud of. The strong financial position that's anchoring this budget that's being presented to you here tonight, it didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen by accident. It's the product of a decade of fiscally responsible leadership on the Macon County Board of Commissioners and the hard work and dedication of the Macon County employees that have acted under the direction of the Macon County Board of Commissioners for that last decade. Decisions of this body have successfully navigated this organization through economic highs, economic lows, unfunded mandates, and most recently a pandemic. While these decisions weren't always easy, they weren't always popular, their cumulative effect has resulted in a financially strong, well-running organization that is positioned perfectly to lead this county into the future. It's an undeniable fact that is illustrated by Macon County's AA2 credit rating that we're one of the most financially solid local government organizations in the state of North Carolina. Highlighting this position is our fund balance of $48.7 million. It's going to increase again this year by about $3.6 million. That fund balance earned us $3.1 million in interest in fiscal year 24. Under conservative revenue assumptions in the capital improvement plan, we currently have the debt capacity to support $70,100,000 of $133,650,000 in education-related capital improvements in the coming fiscal year through our Capital Reserve Fund. We will get the most favorable rates that the market has to offer when we go to issue this debt because of our strong financial position. What I'm saying is that the most significant year of capital expenditures in the history of Macon County is able to be accomplished with no increase to the ad valorem tax rate, without maxing out the county's debt capacity that's currently at $22.4 million, and our fund balance will never fall below $25 million. There are not many county governments in the state of North Carolina that can have the conversations we can have, and that is because of the financial position that we are in. But again, it didn't happen overnight. Looking back to this, it's coming apart at the seams now, but looking back to 2015, in this budget right here, this was the first revaluation of property that had occurred in Macon County since the recession in 2008. We had postponed to do an octennial, so we were 8 years past the recession. It wasn't every 4. We had it at 8 at that time. The following year, that revaluation would result in a 19% decline in our tax base, where, last revaluation, we saw a 51% increase. Well, the fiscal year 15 revaluation, we were looking down the barrel at a 19% decrease in property value across the county. So what that meant was in fiscal year 16, we had to take that tax rate from 0.279 to 0.349 per $100 of assessed value. At this time, the fund balance was around $16 million. We had about $44 million, double what we have today, in outstanding debt. Annual capital outlay to the Macon County school system was $99,000 a year. A Franklin High School at this time was far more of a dream than a reality. We didn't even have a capital improvement plan at this time. We had just got done conducting a pay study in the following year. That part of it was implemented that year, but in 2015, in this budget right here, we couldn't implement the remainder of that pay study because we had a health insurance fund that was losing $818,000 a year. That health insurance fund, since 2009 at that time, had gone from a reserves of $6 million, and it was at that time empty. So we had to make changes to our health insurance plan. Every bit of additional revenue that we had coming in had to go towards that health insurance plan and keeping it solvent. At $45 million, the fiscal year 15 budget represented a budget that was $1.9 million less than the budget prior to it. Of course, we left contributions to the school system flat this year at $7.3 million, and rather than a cost of living adjustment, county employees were given 16 hours annual leave. So that was a decade ago. That was 10 years ago. But over the course of that, annual budgets that have been discussed and implemented, approved at this level, and implemented across our organization, while they've all been unique, they've all been accompanied by their own set of challenges, they have all been similar in one aspect, and that is that they've been grounded in fiscal responsibility. Year in and year out, through economic highs and economic lows, as I've said, we've consistently delivered high-quality public services to the citizens of Macon County. Never exceeded the third lowest tax rate in the state during this time. Over the course of this, we've corrected a health insurance fund. Today, county employee contributions to the health insurance fund, what a county employee pays for their health insurance, has not increased in 5 years. There's $1.2 million in that health insurance fund today. And that is because of the people that have implemented this budget. The hardworking county employees. That health insurance committee, it was made up of county employees that developed the plan to bring us out of the hole on that health insurance. 2 pay studies have been conducted in-house during this decade. These have been conducted by county employees, and they were implemented in full. Our vacancy rate following the implementation of the last pay study in 2021, the vacancy rate of this organization dropped by 72%. We've increased funding to education. We've built new facilities. We've renovated old facilities. Our reserves have grown by 50%, and our debt has decreased by 50%. And as we come on in to fiscal year 25, let's take a look back at what we most recently accomplished. What you gentlemen have most recently accomplished in this fiscal year. With respect to broadband expansion in Macon County, we have, through the GREAT grant and through the expansion in Nantahala of $600,000, we'll provide broadband internet service to all of our county facilities over there that's capable of being expanded far out into the Nantahala community. Through using $50,000 in ARPA funds, we received the second round of GREAT grant funding that's going to be used to provide high-speed internet to approximately 263 unserved locations in Macon County. With respect to economic development, within that same vein, the Duotech expansion project. Duotech's been here since 1986. We've offered the incubator property to them. They purchased it for right around $800,000. They're planning a $6.5 million expansion of their aerospace defense business, and they're going to bring on 95 jobs at an average salary of $82,144 a year in economic development. The Macon Middle School locker room facility and track We finished the $2.7 million locker room facility in this fiscal year. We just approved the bid for a $930,000 track at Macon Middle School campus. Southwestern Community College, we're going to leverage $5.5 million of capital improvements at Southwestern Community College following a $3 million investment by this Board of Commissioners. That's going to be a fire safety training facility. It's about a $4 million project, $2.6 million county funded, $1.4 million state funding. That will be accomplished in the coming fiscal year, as will the expansion of a science classroom at the Grove Center. This is an estimated $1.5 million project. Staying right on in education there, Nantahala Community, the Nantahala purchase of property, $90,000. We were able to purchase that this year, where we'll begin to upgrade that wastewater treatment plant that has been 20 years in the making. In education, we finished the Highland School design. That is coming to completion and getting ready to be discussed in conjunction with Franklin High School project, which we've spent up to date about $3.8 million in architectural fees on the Franklin High School project, and it is now coming to fruition. We'll be having a meeting later this month to discuss these education projects that we've kept going and we kept moving forward in this fiscal year, and we're certainly looking forward to that. So as we get to fiscal year 25, this budget, just like fiscal year 14-15, it'll have challenges, but we'll be able to overcome those challenges. And as we look, the growth in the fiscal year budget, first and foremost, at $63.7 million, this budget is about a $50,000 decrease from the budget we saw last fiscal year. And that's coming as a result of the leveling out of growth. You know, we saw a huge growth in budget last year coming as a result of dramatic revenue increases. The fiscal year 15 budget that I went over with you, we were seeing a dramatic decline in growth there, but that budget accommodated it. Last year's budget accommodated it, and in this year's budget, that leveling out is what this budget will accommodate. So at $63.7 million, again, we'll remain fiscally responsible, as it has resulted in a decade of success to this organization and the citizens of Macon County. These revenue assumptions in this budget are based on the most conservative revenue estimates, and while growth has slowed, we still face many of the challenges that we faced during the pandemic. If you look, economic growth is slowing across the nation. Quarter one of 24 GDP falling to 1.6%. That's down to 3.4% from quarter three of 23. It's the slowest growth since calendar year 22. So that comes, and that was the intended purpose. That was the intended purpose of raising the federal funds interest rate, which we've saw inflation overall trend downward, but at 3.4% in April. It had ticked up in recent months leading up to April, but it's down overall at 3.4%. Certainly not as high as what we were looking at last year, but it's still something we have to contend with. Also, wage growth, although it's coming down as well, it still remains well above historic levels, as we're going to look at examples around the region that we're seeing, and unemployment at around 3.5%. It's just it continues to be everybody that wants to work is working. As we've discussed, this will maintain our solid financial position. We have never been more well-positioned financially to move forward in the coming fiscal year. We're insulated from economic uncertainty and the fiscal responsibility. And what I'm talking about when insulated from economic uncertainty is that the tax base, we will see a little growth in revenue in the coming fiscal year, in tax base. And so while we see real estate sales numbers dropping from pandemic highs, they're down about 18.6% in Franklin, 13.7% in Highlands. Those average sale prices, they continue to remain up there. Values continue to remain up there. Highlands average sales price since 2019, the average sales price for homes in Highlands has increased by $1.1 million. It's increased 86%. when you look at Franklin, the average home price in Franklin is $290, right at $301,000. So I mean that's just $307,000. Excuse me. That's a 65% increase in Franklin since 2019. So that's where those values are at. Again, this is not the growth that we saw last year, but it is representative of what's going on. While your real estate sales are down, your building permits, your residential building permits are still on pace with last year. We're still seeing that development activity. So you have a combination of that occurring that is going to generate a increase in your tax base. So our property values will increase by $245 million in the coming fiscal year. Motor vehicles will increase by $43 million total value. So that's going to generate about a $686,000 increase in tax collections revenue in the operating budget. And remember, that's our most consistent source of revenue. That is revenue that can be relied upon. Sales tax, as it represents about 15% of our 22% of our budget. Excuse me, the $14.1 million that we budgeted last year will again be budgeted this year, and this will be the second year that we have not budgeted for growth in sales tax revenues. At the time that we were presenting the budget last year, sales tax revenues were 15% above prior year actuals. This year, they're 1.7% below prior year actuals. So while, certainly going back to the premise that every budget's been based on conservative revenue principles, we're not worried about this. We're fine. This revenue's representative of no growth, and no growth's what we're seeing. So we basically planned for what we're seeing here with respect to sales tax. Service fees, ambulance revenues makes up a lion's share of your service fees. In addition to that, you have your construction and development industries. You're going to see some increases and decreases within those service fee categories that are kind of representative of what's going on as well. For instance, you're going to see an increase in excise fee revenue in Register of Deeds because of property values. The values are higher, and the stamps on the deed reflect the property value. So that revenue source is higher, while your recording fee, based on the actual deed recording, is going to go down. Similar building inspections, you're not going to see the decline in building inspections because we're just not seeing the decline in building inspections. Development continues to occur. And so with intergovernmental revenue, Medicaid, you're going to see a decline in Medicaid reimbursement. That's going to be in your health department, and that's going to contribute to that decline in intergovernmental revenue there. And then miscellaneous revenue, as you will recall, the miscellaneous revenue source is what we used in the prior year to increase our capital spending levels far above what we've saw to be historically normal levels, as we'll look at here in a minute, and furthermore, levels that we could sustain under normal growth conditions. So in anticipation also of the capital improvement plan in fiscal year 25 calls for a $20 million reduction from our principal amount, which basically your interest on investment is earned from our fund balance. So if we take $20 million from that to go into the CIP, there's going to be less money there. And we've also assumed, though, that this leveling out of the economy is going to result in the federal funds interest rate to begin coming down. So that will negatively impact this revenue source. However, if that federal funds interest rate is coming down, we should see building activity pick up, home sales pick up, and that operating revenue sources in sales tax and tax collections pick up. So the intergovernmental revenue here, or the miscellaneous revenue here, is kind of acting like an insurance account, if you will. It has to act inverse of what's going on with respect to your operating revenue sources. Just to give you an idea, in miscellaneous revenue here, we have $818,000 budgeted for interest on investments. This budget is balanced using $818,000 in interest on investments. The pre-pandemic average for interest on investment from fiscal year 18 through fiscal year 21 was about $550,000 a year. We earned $2.4 million on interest on investments in fiscal year 23, and we have earned $3.1 million in interest on investments in fiscal year '24. So again, going back to conservative budgeting and using conservative revenue estimates, we have it budgeted, this budget's balanced at $818,000 in interest on investment revenue. So overall, while the operating revenue is decreasing here, your intergovernmental revenue, which largely, again, is grants, and then us reducing those levels of interest on investments back to levels that are representative of normal growth conditions, you're going to net out to about a $50,000 decline from prior year. So let's look at expenditures. They're shown two different ways here, but despite the annual inflation of 3.4% for the months ending in April of '24, expenditures are going to decrease by about $50,000. Nonetheless, the expenditures at this level will leave us well prepared and to maintain the high level of service, which we've become accustomed to. As I mentioned earlier, your inflation, your sustained high demand levels, not only are your demand levels high in building inspections, your demand levels remain at previous year levels in EMS, your demand levels remain at previous year levels in Sheriff's Department, Animal Control Department, across the board. You can go department through department, and demand continues to be at these levels. So all of these things are creating challenges for us. The record unemployment, or the record low unemployment, the slowing of economic growth has contributed to that. But the distribution of revenues in this chart to the right, when you look at these increases and decreases on the far right, let's get them back up here. That's how we're going to deal with these challenges in the coming fiscal year. The new growth that we just discussed, that was generated in ad valorem tax, combined with a reduction in capital expenditures, is now going to be directed toward operations. This increased revenue to operations is going to allow us to offset unavoidable increases in salary and benefits, as well as unavoidable increases in non-salary and benefit-related operating expenditures. And you can see that there at the top, your salaries and benefits, they account for about $33 million of that $63 million in the coming fiscal year, increase of about $1.1 million. Similarly, non-salary and benefit-related operating expenditures, that's the tools that we use in this organization to do the job that we do. That's everything from paper and pencils in human resources to medical supplies and ammo in the Sheriff's Department budget. That is everything that we do represented there. And again, that's about a $200,000 increase. Annual capital spending, as we discussed earlier, it will decline. But when you look between education and county capital expenditures, so your third line down, that is county-related capital expenditures. That's what we spend on county needs. At $1.9 million, combined with what we will spend on education at $1.3, that level of capital spending represents a 27% increase above the pre-pandemic average of $2.4 million annually. So that just goes to show you, while we're bringing capital spending back down to normal levels within this budget, we've talked about new normal and how that, before the pandemic, things were here, then they spiked up and they came back down, but they're still at a level well above they were before pre-pandemic. So this new level of capital expenditures here is representative of what we're seeing here in the county. We're going to be able to accomplish a lot with that. Transfers and non-departmental combined at $3.7 million. That's about a $22,000 increase in the prior year. You had some reductions there in transfers that were offset we had to have an increase in our workers' comp and property and liability insurance in non-departmental, so that offsets. We've also included a $221,570 contingency fund. That's included in your non-departmental as well. Special appropriations, slight increase. We gave $50,000 to the Fair Association. They had came before us, and we, in the current fiscal year, and we told them we'd give them $50,000, put it in their budget, and they needed to make some improvements there. So we have included that. The pie chart here, and we'll talk about education separately, The pie chart here, it's in your budget book. It just illustrates the functions and how the expenditures are spread out. Public safety at 30%, of course, is the majority of the funds we spend here. Education, 19%. Human services, they're at $14.2 million. You got to remember, only $6.6 million of that's represented in county money. The rest of it is your intergovernmental revenue is reflected there in human services. Same with transit, transportation there at $1.5 million. That's only reflective of $304,000 in county funding. So as we look at expenditures overall, the education operations expenditure level here, that represents an increase of about $300,000 to education. We will increase funding to education for the second year in a row, both to Macon County School System and to Southwestern Community College. Prior to last year, operational funding hadn't been increased to Macon County Schools since fiscal year 20. We will, capital will remain, annual capital expenditures for public education will remain largely at current year levels. So moving along, when you look at specific expenditures to Macon County, we've removed education from it and talk a little bit specifically about the county budget. First, salaries and benefits. So in April of 2024, my health director, Kathy McGaha, came before the board, requested the addition of 2 environmental health positions. The board honored that request at that time. The board also honored, or did not honor, but indicated that to work with management to add that request to the 24 budget. We have done that. Since that time, Ms. McGaha later returned in May and reported that through new leadership, they were able to hire an interim director over there. That position had been vacant for months. That under new leadership, combined with some best management practices, that department was able to implement following some conversations and discussions with Jackson County. They were able to reduce what was then a 6-week backlog to 6 permits. I think Ms. McGaha said at that meeting in May. So with that being said, that was a development that had occurred between the time of that April decision of the board, or the April indication of the board, and then what had occurred. So about $171,000 is attributable to the addition of these positions. And, the board also awarded $20,000 at that time, as I mentioned, to overtime, and that was used. Overtime was used, contract labor was used, and that's how they brought the permits into line. So I have recommended, while those positions are funded, I have recommended that the board consider maybe having some more discussions with the health department and postponing the hiring of those until January 1st or sometime to see if this does continue. Then that's great. If they can continue to manage that, if they've been able to successfully do that, have that kind of turnaround in a month with $20,000 for contracted services and overtime, maybe that's something that should be discussed further. But nonetheless, that money will be reflected in the salaries and benefits, and those positions, the only 2 positions that were added, are going to be there. I would like to say thank you. Also, with respect to positions, these are the only 2 positions that were included in the FY25 budget. But if you'll look in recreation, even with the cost of living adjustment and the step increase, you'll see a $37,000 reduction in salaries and benefits in recreation. And that's because over the past 2 fiscal years, through the addition of contract labor, we've been able to eliminate 2 positions from recreation department. So just going to show you how that, again, we're taking steps there to control our operating costs with respect to salary and benefits. So that's what's going on with the positions. The 2% cost of living adjustment has been recommended for all county employees. That comes, again, in October of 21, when we implemented the pay study. There were 47 vacancies across the organization. Today, there are 13. There were 21 vacancies in public safety at that time. Today, I think there are 4. It's in your budget book, but I can't remember. But it just goes to show you the impact that implementation of the pay study, along with are continuing with, as inflation has crept up, as everything continues to rise, our ability to keep pace with that. Now, as everything continues to, or starts to level off or come down, again, this budget responds to that. Last year, we were looking at a higher COLA than that. The step increase, again, is pay plan maintenance, advancing each of our employees through the pay plan. And this is our biggest challenge. I think the ability to continue recruiting and retaining high-quality employees remains the biggest challenge. And it's not just my opinion. When you look around, we've had 2 counties contact us this year, Cherokee County and Swain County. We were both contacted by agencies that were conducting pay studies for these counties. I don't know if they implemented in the coming fiscal year or not, but it remains to be seen. This study was being conducted. The North Carolina Association and North Carolina League of Municipalities, as they do every year, issue what counties and towns across the state are doing. For counties in the West, it's 3.6% average cost of living adjustment. The town of Highlands, I know, has approved or has presented a 5% cost of living adjustment. I think Jackson County is presenting a 3% cost of living adjustment. So while we're not, maybe not as high as some, we're still able to do something. We're still able to continue maintaining our pay plan. We're still able to acknowledge that the cost of living does continue to increase for our employees. The health insurance plan, again, 5 years, no increase. And fiscal year 15, getting back to that story, that wasn't the last time we had to wrestle with health insurance. From fiscal year 16 through fiscal year 19, 4 years. In those 4 years, the operating budget contributions were $1.2 million. Our operating budget had to increase each year to go into that health insurance reserve fund. Furthermore, we had to make one-time contributions to the reserve fund of $1.8 million over that time period. So that was prior to joining NCHIP. And since then, again, it's worked, and that is why the no increase to contributions is a big deal, because that whole time that operating cost that benefit is eating up, that's money that can't go to the employees. That's money that you don't see, that you can't show to the employee and continue to advance. So we're very proud of that. We're also very proud of our ability to control this non-salary and benefit relating operating expenses. That's a mouthful at $12.6 million. But nonetheless, while this is an increase of $200,000, $250,000 from the prior year, this right here is $50,000 less than what we spent in this category of expenditures in fiscal year 23. And that just goes to show you there are, as we've discussed, and it's in your previous year budget message, the different types of expenditures in here. There's ones we can't control, the inmate medical in the sheriff's jail. The sheriff, if somebody comes in there pregnant with cancer and got one of their legs gone, he's got to take care of them. He's got to pay that medical bill. We don't know what that will be, but we have money in there, and so things fluctuate. Things go up, things go down, but nonetheless, this organization has done an excellent job of controlling these costs, and I've highlighted for you in the budget message. We really went, and when we looked at whenever this became a thing, was in fiscal year 21. And in fiscal year 21, that was the budget of the pandemic. That was when we had to take all the capital expenditures out of the budget. There was no capital in the budget. And we went through these non-salary and benefit operating costs with the finest tooth comb you could go through, because we didn't know, we had to reduce sales tax. I think we reduced sales tax 30% in that budget. 30% revenue reduction in sales tax, because that's when everybody thought, we didn't know what was going to happen. So anyway, we evaluated these. There were no new phones, all the programs and initiatives, all the office supplies. And so we went back, and I included in the 21, this is from the 21 budget. This is an excerpt from it, and it says here, the fiscal year 21 total budget amount of $1,321,810 within the accounts of telephone, printing, advertising, equipment maintenance, operating supplies, computer supplies, office supplies, uniforms, vehicle maintenance, is representative of a $67,000 decrease in expenditures from FY '20, but it was a $183,000 decrease from fiscal year '19. When you look at those same 11 line items today that were 1.3 million when we went through them with a fine-tooth comb in '21, today they total 1.4 million. And then they were 1.32 in '21, they're 1.4 today. The total for those same across the whole organization. That's a 6% increase. During the same time, cumulative inflation is approximately 16.5%. So what I'm saying is that our ability to control these has been so pivotal, just as pivotal as new revenue coming in, to being able to continue moving forward with these salary things. And that's because these employees continue to do their part. They continue to operate efficiently and effectively. These increases, you have a $102,900 increase. And I'll tell you one thing. With $63 million, we're going to get these TVs fixed next year. So, anyway.
We can see them.
Can you still see them?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
You need to look at this one.
Okay, so with these, within the $250,000 increase, when you look at what's led to that increase, culture and recreation, that's non-salary and benefit related operating expenditures. And again, all this is outlined in your budget book. I'm just trying to keep it real high level. For the recreation function, that's about $2.1 million in expenditures. That's an 81,000 of that is an increase to Fontana Regional Library in the coming fiscal year as the Nantahala building comes on site, and as again the same issues that we're dealing with salary and benefit wise for county employees, so are the county employees that we fund in other organizations as well. That has been included in there to help address that. Thank you, sir. General government, you got about a $54,000 increase. That's about $2.7 million in non-salary and benefit related operating expenditures that the general government spends each year. This $54,000 increase is primarily due. You had an increase in your tax office as the revaluation. You're going to see it in contracted services. That works on a cycle. As the revaluation of 27 gets closer, our contract increases gradually as we come into the revaluation year. In addition, you're going to see in the building and grounds department about a $13,000 increase, and that's across the board utilities. That's for electricity, water, sewer, natural gas. So you'll see that increase there. Other than that, everything stayed pretty consistent. I think there's 11 orgs in the general government function altogether, 11 different departments, and I think the average non-salary and benefit relating operating increase across all those was $1,300. So again, holding the line on those. Public safety had a $57,000 increase, but $66,000 of that is for the we're going to start storing the body camera footage on cloud-based storage rather than internally on our storage. Server cost about $270,000 versus this $66,000 that will be in the courthouse security budget this year. A lot of that is upfront initial cost and will go away next year. So, while there again, that's one of those costs. While it's reflected this year, you'll actually see a decrease from it next year. So we've been able to hold the line with respect to non-salary and benefit related operating expenditures. Capital, you have a 3.65 million total. Again, about 1.9 million of that is representative of annual capital outlay for county needs. You can see here how that stacks up. Fiscal year 25, that of course is at the top, and you can see through the years, going back all the way to fiscal year 18. When we talk about that new normal and what happened during the pandemic, it's all illustrated in every graph you show. You can see we were able to substantially increase our capital expenditures. in fiscal year '24, and now we're bringing them back down to a level that, while is a decline from '24, still remains well above anything that we've ever known as normal here. So again, representative of a new level of normal. Across the functions, you're going to see about a $628,000 decrease in general government. That if you'll remember, last year we had a lot of those major IT equipment upgrades that we had to do with our backbone to our IT infrastructure. You're going to see a $604,000 reduction in human services capital. That is because the molar roller that we replaced in fiscal year '24 was about an $860,000 expenditure, is not going to be there this year. Transit, we purchased 6 vehicles in '24. We'll only be purchasing 3 in this year, resulting in about a $293,000 decline in the transit function. Nonetheless, the pre-pandemic average of $1.5 million, when you look at annual capital expenditures for county at 1.9, again, I'm just going to say far and above, and we're still going to be doing some things. You know, we talked about the reductions there, but you know, this includes AutoCAD software for the mapping department. It includes emergency vehicles for our sheriff's department. It includes ambulances. It includes defibrillators. It includes new software in the tax office. It's a pictometry flight coming up in this fiscal year. You'll see that reflected in your tax office budget. I think to the tune of about $176,000. Be an increase in tax assessment there that will allow us. This year we will fly the whole county in 3-inch imagery. That is a significant upgrade from the 6-inch imagery that we've flown it with in the past. And I know the tax office is very excited about that. Pictometry is something, again, the annual payment for it shows up in your operating cost, but the detail and precision with which it allows the tax appraisers to measure and to use, it takes the place of people. That's a software that really takes the place of people and helps us be able to do that and control operating costs. So we got a lot going on. Annual capital expenditures at this new normal. There's going to be a lot of good things in the coming fiscal year. So last but not least, John, you said you watched Inside Edition at 7. I got to get you out of here. Education. Let's talk about education. So for the second year in a row, public education funding will increase. It's increased to operations. It's increased 17% in the last 2 years under the watch of this board, which I think highlights this board's commitment to public education. This will go toward funding a 3% raise for all the county-funded employees that we fund in the school system. The school system's initial request was $2.5 million. This included 26 new locally funded teaching positions. These were not recommended in this fiscal year budget, and that's simply because we talk about as you see in the county budget, how that the revenues leveled off, our expenditures leveled off, and so everything is at a level period right now. And this is, I think, you know, for instance, currently we have 30 locally paid teaching positions. That's what the county covers. An addition of 19 teaching positions, that would constitute a 63% increase in the number of locally paid teaching positions. And I just feel like an increase of this magnitude is a new level of commitment based on our history of funding approximately 30 teaching positions a year to the school system. Again, these were teaching positions that had been hired with ESSER funds. It is my understanding that they were notified at the time they were hired that these positions would dissolve when the ESSER funding was gone. ESSER funding will be gone in the next fiscal year. So with that being said, the 19 teaching positions also requested were 7 new mental health professionals at approximately $489,000. So those 19 teaching positions accounted for about $1.7 million of that request. The mental health positions accounted for about 489,000. There were 7 of those requested. And prior to the pandemic, local funding has never paid for mental health professionals working in the school system. And again, while this is very needed, nobody's disputing that. The enhanced level of service that this offers is undeniable. But the revenue conditions that we're currently in demand a flat level of service. And it is not within the revenue parameters of this budget without a tax increase to expand the scope of services or to expand or to increase the commitment to services in these magnitudes. This would be starting a whole new program, again signaling that new level of commitment. And I just think that before I could include those in the recommended budget, I think that these levels of commitment are something that need to be agreed upon by the school board in Macon County. Nonetheless, the locally paid positions that we do support, we will support the 3% salary increase that the state of North Carolina is part of their biennium budget. That was 3% last year, another 3% this year. So we funded that. The Southwestern Community College, again, we have increased their funding $50,000 overall, and that's a 76% increase to the SEC budget in the past 2 years. So in closing, the fiscal year 25 recommended budget. It's probably the most important to me, like I said, because it's been a decade in the making. These county employees have worked their tails off and they've controlled costs. It's enabled this board to be able to make decisions that have reinvested back into this organization, that have reinvested in public education, and made this county great and made it better. This budget sets the foundation of $145 million in CIP improvements. And again, those include improvements like the Franklin High School, the Highlands Project, the Recreation Park, $1.7 million Recreation Park, pickleball and tennis court complex, the pay plan maintenance, cost of living adjustment, no increase to the health insurance. We'll hold the line on operating expenditures, as I said. We'll approach a new level of normal with respect to annual capital expenditures, allowing us to get more maintenance done on these buildings in this organization than we've ever done. And I know that's been a big thing for this board. And I think that moving forward, you'll see in here we've got some roof replacements. We've got some very key facilities that we'll be maintaining in capital that you can see there in your budget. Again, these are built on the most conservative revenue assumptions that you can build a budget on. This budget insulates us. It gives us $221,500 in contingency, maintains the lowest tax rate in the state of North Carolina at 27 cents per $100 of assessed value. And with that being said, as always, Lori, thank you. Lori's excellent. Lori is great. Lindsay, thank you. Finance, Tammy, Pam, just everybody that helped, get this budget put together, all the department heads and county employees. That's all I have.
Mr. Rowland, don't forget yourself. Appreciate what the time that you spent putting this piece together, that you stood up here in
Can't even
front
get
of
this
us and shared
PowerPoint
it.
thing to work.
But we appreciate what you do in bringing your groups together and producing a book of this nature.
Thank you. It was another thing that's changed, I guess, in that decade is got married and 6 kids at home. So,
That'll get your attention.
Hey, hang out a minute.
yes, sir.
I hate to grill you, but I've been writing down a few questions. Can we just go rapid fire for just a minute?
Do it.
Let's just knock these out. And I probably should know some of these. But like, what is our county debt capacity? Right now, you told me, I think we cut it down to somewhere around 20 million currently.
Right now,
And I guess that kind of coincides with our Or millage rate?
Our principal and interest, the total amount of debt we have outstanding is $22 million. That number was $44 million in 2015, as I had mentioned. Now, as far as our debt capacity, I'll have to get into the capital improvement plan in that. So when I said, all I'm saying is that we can take on all those projects and have the ability to still debt finance. I think the number in the capital improvement plan is $14 million.
On our current?
On those, if, assuming that level of capital expenditures occurs.
Okay. I guess, seeing all that is somewhat remarkable, but in my simple mind, how are we able to take on all these new projects on a lesser budget? Looking at,
Well, because your decline in your capital spending,
from last year's.
your decline in your capital spending, it was funded with a portion of interest on investment revenue.
Okay.
That portion of interest on investment revenue wasn't reduced. We only reduced interest in investment revenue by $192,000, but we had probably a $900,000 reduction in capital expenditures. So you had $600,000 new money coming in your ad valorem, and then the rest of that remainder was made up from your interest on investment.
I guess that goes, so the interest on investments, are they reflected on the actual budget, or does that kind of more or less go directly into the fund balance?
No, it's reflected on the actual budget.
All right. And does this budget have its own contingency, or is a contingency referred to, is that kind of a portion of the contingencies that were defaulted back to the
contingency
budget?
funds 221,570.
Out of this budget?
Yes, that's revenues in excess of expenditures.
All right, I've got one or two more. The government stipend on like the Forest Service check they provide us, I can't remember the STP or whatever they call that. Does that increase, is that adjusted
Yes,
with our
things
rate
like
as well?
Things like the 3% state employees, it's reflected in that. Now, one thing about that is, and then our county budget number that we budget for that just has to reflect that match amount. But one thing.
I'm talking property from the government, like our Forest Service lands and the stipend, the PILT money.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, does that fund increase with?
No, it gets approved, and then it stays, they have to, it takes legislation to change, to up and down.
That check's the same every year, doesn't matter what our tax rate is.
Yeah,
We received
but not,
we received $453,000 last year. I budgeted $430 for the upcoming.
So really
I
it's-
just looked at like an average.
Pennies on a $60 million
it's right on
budget.
yeah.
All right. No, that's it. I think the direction of my last question about capital projects, I want to make sure some of the items Mr. Sherrill and I added to the Parks and Rec budget for some maintenance and some ongoing stuff were able to be funded, and to see their budget go down $37,000 with those additions, sounds like the contract labor is really paying off.
It is, and that was, again, with respect to rec, that the reason their capital is at zero is because the CIP has the recreation park.
Yep.
The upgrade. So that is all planned for in that CIP, basically saying you're going to pay for it out of fund balance. So with that being said, getting back to your other question though, your tax collection revenue. So in your salaries and benefits, you had about a $1.1 million increase in salary and benefits there, and a $250,000 increase in non-salary and benefits. So let's call that $1.3 million increase in salary and benefits. Now, of course, that's operating budget. That's operating costs that are going to be there. So, within that realm. So $919,000, of course, does not equal, or right at $1 million, does not equal $1.3 million. So you have $300,000 that is going to come out of that interest on investment revenue that is budgeted at $818,000, $300,000 of those operating costs. And these are just big numbers, but that $818,000, we made $2.4 million in that interest on investments in '23. And again, we've only budgeted at $818,000, so everything balanced. $2.4 million came in '23. $2.3 million came in '23. 3.1 million has came in 24. And as long as the economy stays like it is right now or goes down, interest on investment revenue is going to stay where it is or go up. But the minute that this revenue store starts going down, that means your rates are coming down. Your federal funds interest rates coming down. And that means your operating expenditures, that means your operating revenues are going to go back up. But even though, keep in mind, that 300,000, again, we talked about last year, how that, you don't want to put operating expenses, but that 300,000, the pre-pandemic average for interest on investments is $500,000 a year. Well able to support that 300,000, but it doesn't happen like that. As your operating expenditure, as your operating revenues goes up, and your rate comes down, and this interest on investment revenue goes down, these other revenue sources are going to be going up. So and there again, with respect to capital projects, going back to that interest on investments, we're budgeted $818,000. You could budget that at 2.8. If you wanted to. But the thing is, again, once the rates start coming down, and and I'm just saying that, I just threw that out there because, it'd have to be tied to capital. But I mean, that's how safe this budget is. That's how secure this budget is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anything be added to the agenda that, if you conclude yours, I see Mr. Stahl sitting here and I see.
Yes, Chris is going to come up. He's going to discuss the enterprise fund. You've got that in your budget book as well.
When you get through, then we'll
So
know.
if there is no more questions,
Chris looks a little surprised back there.
he's going to answer any questions you have about it.
But I'm always having to play.
Just rolling you through.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Derek.
We need to add Mr. Stahl to the agenda, or are we just bringing him up?
Other businesses needed.
But we
It
don't
gets
have
on there.
It is.
Did you bring your three-page document? If not, I've got it in this book.
It's in the book.
Other businesses needed. That's for the Chris Stahl.
Thank you, gentlemen. It'll soon be obvious, if you haven't read ahead, how I come to be at the podium tonight. But in your budget package, I'm assuming, okay,
Derek's budget.
behind Derek's, you'll find the
Three-page.
solid waste enterprise fund budget, a narrative. I tried to keep the narrative succinct. I have been cast as one to pontificate for quite some time, and I really wanted to keep it short and straightforward, and very, very clear as to what I was presenting, because this is kind of where we're at. I didn't see any reason to waste your time sugarcoating it or pie in the sky. The enterprise fund, we will be looking for a $12 increase to the availability fee. That's for every improved property, residential and commercial, throughout the county. That represents an increase in revenue of $330,000. If you look on the second page of, there's a little table there on the second page of my narrative that spells out where that $12 is needed. Excuse me. Mr. Higdon, you had asked me to look at convenience center employees We've made several changes to them over the past few years. I think we've increased the starting pay for those workers over $5 over the last 4 or 5 budget cycles. We've also made adjustments for longevity. And so what made sense and what I evaluated was if we change the grades. As these folks are the only employees that don't have a full-time equivalent, they didn't have a pay grade. And so when we as we've gone through this process, we set them at a grade 17, with leads being a grade 18. And so this increase takes them from a grade 17 to 18, and then the leads from an 18 to a 19. So that's a 5% increase plus the COLA that would happen for all the other employees. And it turns out, it's any grade increase is about $1 availability fee. The second one is the full-time staff with the COLA and STEP that Derek presented with his budget for the solid waste department, for the enterprise fund to pay for that is at $2.68 needed on the availability fee. Item 3 is a frustration for me. The state imposed some new testing requirements for PFAS, the forever chemicals that are the latest thing that's going to kill us all. And so that increased my semi-annual drinking water monitoring costs almost $70,000, which is almost 100% increase. And that represents another $2.50 to cover that cost. And finally, excuse me, in an attempt to keep the budget down, well, I try to every year, but we just had a incredible year for breakdowns this year. I think in every department, we wind up having to replace 2 road tractors. The baler at recycling, apparently they stopped supporting the software 15 years into a 30-year machine's life cycle, and that was a huge hit. At any rate, we've had to move throughout this year to keep our budget going. We've had to cancel or postpone capital projects and move that money into operating to get through the year. And while Lori lets me get away with reacting to these things with capital money, she's not going to let me budget operating with capital money. So out of that roughly $300,000, $167,000 went into operating. The rest of that went diverted into other capital projects like the 2 trucks that we bought, into capital expenditures. So that comes to a total of about $6 on the availability fee. And if you add those up, you get right at $12. So I'm happy to answer questions or let y'all process and answer questions when you have them, or whatever you would like.
When you use the term center lead workers, can you define that?
Yeah, so with a couple of exceptions, each center has a lead worker. That person's responsible for making sure that the timesheets get in, to make sure that the schedule is covered, or if there's a problem with the schedule, communicate to the recycling coordinator to make sure we get it covered. So they have some extra duties on top of
The regular duties.
yes.
Chris, how long have you been at 108? How long have you been at 108?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I should have looked at that. It's been probably, well, I can 17 or 18 when we took on the $1 million note. And that would have been, I guess, 17 because it'll run out in 26.
2016. We talked about your loan to
Yeah.
build the sale.
Yeah.
That was 2016.
Okay, well, that's when we went to 108. And of course,
And you went, what was before 108? So what was that jump?
it might have been 70. I can't remember if there was, like, it was 70, like, 20 years. And then I think we went to 90. Right, a few years before we went to 108. But when we went to we took on $1 million worth of debt, and you can do the math at 27,000 per dollar. We basically raised an additional 400,000, and the other 600,000 we pulled out of the operating budget, which was probably a little over aggressive on my part.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when he's saying we took on $1 million of debt, the debt service payment
Debt service payment, I'm
is
sorry.
almost 1.1 million a year. We borrowed 9.8 million to build the new landfill cell.
Right.
But the debt service payment for a 10-year loan was right at 1.1 million a year.
I'm sorry, thank you, I said that poorly.
Chris, what is the enterprise fund balance?
You know, John, I knew I was gonna be asked that question, and I will stand here and I'll give you an honest answer. I've been doing this job 23 years and 1 month, and I have never known the answer to that question. And frankly, I don't wanna know. I present a budget without, I know that there's $10+ million sitting somewhere. I can't tell you how much of that is obligated versus non-obligated. And I've never known, and there's $2 million. The way I set the budget up is to pay for operating expenses from revenues and to put capital purchases and projects out of fund balance. And so when I believe this budget has 1.7 million in fund balance. When I put 1.7 in there and she doesn't call me and raise hell, that's all I need to know.
Well, I mean, the biggest part of that question is, how do we know, other than what you're stating, that you need the additional revenue? If you've got this enormous fund balance,
Well,
Have an enormous fund balance.
no, it's not.
You gotta realize, we're up against closing a major landfill sale, which is an estimated cost of,
15, probably.
and we do have amounts in reserves. Every year, we set aside reserves to close said sale. But yeah, if you look at his cash only, you're like, wow, he's got a lot of money. But then if you look at that liability, what it's gonna cost to close that sale, probably within, a year or so?
2 years.
2 years max. And that's a huge cost that keeps growing due to inflation. I can take a look though at his normal fund balance, and I'm assuming we'll probably have at least one budget work session, a general one, aside from the one that's coming up Tuesday for education purposes. But I'll be glad to take a look at that and
To your
kind of
question, John,
give you a number.
if I had it's kind of like the same with the general fund. If I had a higher fund balance, I still would not want to use that for recurring operating
No,
expenses.
not at all.
And
It's capital,
frankly,
one-time
anything that I
capital
do
only.
have is probably going to get eaten up in what inflation has done to my closure cost estimates. I think they were out doing the surveying today, so we'll have an updated estimates coming here shortly. But based on what we're seeing in construction costs for this type of work, anything that I have that I can let go of is probably going to have to supplement my obligated funds because there's probably not going to be enough there. Even though, thank God, we have funded it to the best of our estimates.
On equipment, do you have like an expected life cycle, maybe like a depreciation schedule that you maybe turn around on 3 to 5 years, or do you kind of let a lot of this stuff turn into dinosaurs and then replace it after 20?
Well, most of this equipment, I'll just use the compactor
I
because
mean,
that's the biggest
everyday
one.
equipment, you know.
Yeah, the compactor's the most expensive. It's running 8-9 hours a day. Generally, you will get, the manufacturer, you'll get 10 to 14,000 hours. At 2,000 hours a year is a good estimate. We try to get 20. So that's, we try to run a compactor for 10 years. Dozers, well, I mean, 20 is kind of the limit on anything. There are a lot of, I mean, other landfills that I've talked to, over my years, they have a more frequent replacement. They try to replace between 10 and 12,000 hours. Fortunately, the guys really try to take care of the PM stuff, and so we try our best to get 20 out of it, or get 10 years out instead of 5 to 7.
Out of a dozer, 10 years.
I mean, we have our last 3 dozers, and the oldest one's probably 15 years old. So they kind of step down in importance, you know, the one we're using every day versus the one that's there when this one's down. And then the third one, you know, it may be working slopes or, you know, cutting roads or, you know, ancillary work. And then whatever we have older than that goes to the, I don't know, gov deals or whatever we do with it, so.
Mr. Deal, I see you standing over there, or you,
Wait for this gentleman to finish so I can grab my recorder. I don't want to interrupt
Oh.
the conversation.
By all means.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
no problem.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stahl, for what
Thank
you
you.
do and for the county. And we feel for you, the complications that you have to endure. But thank you very much for what you do and your people.
Thank you,
The
I
people
appreciate
at
it.
that's why I was wanting to know about what that center lead worker, because a lot of times when some of us, we drive through there, there's always the person wants to talk to us about retiring and things.
Oh, Jesus, you go to Holly Springs, do you?
No, I'll go to Carson. It's on that end too.
Yeah. He's our most reliable fill-in, but there are things you have to get with that, so, sorry about that. If it helps, I have that exact same conversation every 2 years with the same person, so.
At least they're interested in still communicating with you.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Saul, for
Thank you.
your time.
Thank you, Chris.
Mr. Rowland, do we have anything else before we go into closed session?
I don't think, is there a need for one?
Yes.
For closed session?
Yes.
I have one, that's under 143-318.11A. Whichever number it is for property acquisition. 475, I can give
like
you
that.
that one, Hanley, for your records.
Motion to go into closed session, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Let's let him see if he's through with his. Mr. Right now, you want us to go ahead into or to hang with you?
He said, man, that went quick.
Amend the record.
Have me turn red on the whole breath.
Y'all want to
Tammy will get the,
I'm all right.
Well, I'm gonna say that, I'm gonna blame Kelly for messing my notebook up. 133-318.11A.
It's okay.
we'll let the record reflect the correct statute.
So we've had a motion, it's been second,
Yep,
all in agreement.
Nobody knows one from the other.
let's go.
Thank y'all very much. You're welcome to hang out or go to Burger King. Whatever you want to do.